Welcome to the webinar, How to Unify Enterprise Service Agreements using the Unified Service Management Method. My name is John Worthington. I'll be walking us through the webinar today, and I'll give you more information on my background in a minute. But first, let me tell you what this is all about. Services consciously abstract the internal operations of a business capability. Most customers don't care about how you get them what they want. Their focus is on the overall value proposition. Now, of course, to deliver on this value proposition, the service provider has to decompose this abstract vision into an operational reality. A service can't exist unless there's some level of agreement or understanding between the customer and the provider. So whether you have a formal contract or not, all services are defined by their agreements. In an enterprise service management setting, a unified service agreement is very much a linchpin for efficient and agile service management. It can provide a common language and structure that's critical in today's digital services world. Think about it this way. Imagine you're captain of a ship and you have to navigate across an ocean of complexity. Your crew includes all the different departments and business units who help you keep the ship afloat. But if each department or business unit has their own set of navigational rules, communication protocols, and maybe even different ideas on where you're headed, your ship is likely to hit stormy water. Unifying your service agreements is like bringing order to a chaotic sea. As Henry Ford once said, coming together is the beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. Unifying your service agreements across the enterprise with the USM method can be transformative. It can help you fully leverage any best practice or standard and be a catalyst for seamless collaboration, increased efficiency, and business success. So, how can we navigate the complexities of diverse enterprise service agreements to streamline operations and improve collaboration across different departments and stakeholders? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Bridging the gap between abstract visions of customer value and the decomposed reality of complex operationalized services. So here's our agenda. First, we should discuss some of the challenges with enterprise service agreements. Then we'll get into the basic steps that take place as we create and edit service agreements and the path to realizing value, both for the customer and the provider. Then I'll show you how the USM method can help you bridge the abstraction decomposition gap. We'll talk about how unifying enterprise service agreements can help any service management initiative and how the USM method helps you navigate today's stormy seas. And I'll wrap it up by taking some questions and showing you where you can find more information or get help. Okay, let's dig into some of the challenges we have with enterprise service agreements. A huge part of the problem is just with definitions. I like to think of it as playing charades with a dictionary. Endless arguments, lots of hand waving, and at the end of the day, everybody just winds up with a headache. Now think about it. The practice guidance all have different definitions of a service, and many of those are ambiguous. And even ISO, a standards body, was found to have 100 different definitions of a service. Now, the impact of multiple frameworks being used by an enterprise is part of this problem. Each framework gets tailored to different practices or domains. So you can have ITIL for IT and maybe COBIT for finance, and the definitions of a service can vary, and sometimes pretty significantly. or they're specific to only one part of the enterprise. This can lead to a lot of service management headaches. Ambiguity leads to misunderstandings and misinterpretations, which leads to inconsistency in service delivery, poor customer experience, and operational inefficiencies due to duplication, redundancy, and wasted resources. It can also lead to measurement challenges. The lack of standards can make identifying the right KPIs difficult. And since we have a higher likelihood of errors due to a lack of standardization, it can increase the need for training and support, which leads to increased costs and risks. So while we want to take advantage of different practice guidance, standards, and reference models, we need to be careful that they don't create ambiguity when it comes to the definition of exactly what a service is. And this is compounded by the dynamic and rapidly changing nature of today's services. A growing reliance on complex technologies and complex dependencies across service supply chains, and the increasing demands of customers for seamless and consistent experiences. I've been on both sides of this fence, spending my first 2 decades in business relationship roles working directly with customers, and the last 2 decades mostly in service management. I'm familiar with many different practice frameworks, and I'm focusing my last bit of energy as a certified trainer and coach in the USM method. And don't forget, while the session is being pre-recorded, I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll try to answer questions as we go. Let's continue by looking at the service agreement and the path to realizing value for both the customer and the provider. The path to realizing value can be viewed in the context of a generic innovation process, where we move from ideation to exploitation. As we move along this path, we iterate along the way and leverage many different industry practice frameworks, reference models, and standards. And this iterative path actually has a series of abstractions and decompositions along the way. And of course, sitting right in the middle of this is the service agreement. Now, maybe it goes without saying, but always start with a customer, and that's where we'll begin. The first phase of decomposing any service agreement is understanding what the customer wants and why they want it. And this involves understanding customer needs, identifying the critical service components and interactions, and drafting the functional specifications. And when we do this, we can apply whatever practice guidance is appropriate for our particular context and organization. But in all cases, we're identifying the wishes of the customer and decomposing this into a functional specification. Now, I'm going to use experience level agreements, jobs to be done theory, and successful customer outcomes and moments of truth as example practice guidance. But of course, there's plenty of other guidance available. First, let's talk about the customer experience. Customer experience is a cumulative measurement over time. An experience level agreement, or XLA, represents a commitment to creating a defined experience for a customer. And experience indicators, or XIs, are the wants and needs that shape the XLA experience. It's important to understand that XLAs and XIs measure sentiment data. And this is why we use things like questionnaires that ask how a customer feels about some part of the customer journey. Jobs to be done theory says that when customers have a job to do, they often buy a product or service to help them complete it. And this theory goes beyond what a customer is buying to why they are buying it. Jobs to be done theory attaches value to what services enable customers to get done in particular contexts of use. When using jobs to be done, we create customer job statements. Customer job statements are abstract. They're not the same as user stories, which detail how a user would use a specific product or technology to complete a task. Job statements can also be elaborated into different dimensions, so they can not only capture functional requirements, but also emotional and social aspects. Here's a few examples of different dimensions of customer jobs. One for an IT service, a parking garage, and one for healthcare. And we used functional, emotional, and social dimensions here, but there might be different dimensions that relate to your particular context or industry. So these dimensions could vary significantly from one industry to another, from technology integration to wellness, accessibility, or many others. Using moments of truth in capturing successful customer outcomes is a bit different. Moments of truth capture critical touch points along the customer journey. These are your opportunities to create great customer experiences. Successful customer outcomes need to deliver on these customer expectations and also make the customer's life simpler and easier. You can connect the dots between jobs to be done, which can help measure overall customer experience, and moments of truth, which measure those critical touch points. Each touch point can be associated with customer jobs and whatever dimensions are appropriate for a particular context. So when you arrive at the parking garage, you're expecting quick and convenient access, peace of mind that your car will be safe, and you want the parking attendant to be friendly and courteous. Moments of truth, successful customer outcomes, and customer job statements are similar, but they have different applications and focus. Each are customer oriented, help you understand customer needs, and can facilitate ongoing improvement. But moments of truth measure specific points and moments in time. They're tactical. Customer job statements tend to be focused over time and are ongoing. They're a more strategic perspective. So we might use this kind of practice guidance, and perhaps others, to create a functional specification that outlines what the service is supposed to do from a user or business perspective. The functional specification focuses on what rather than how, and it's usually a non-technical document that can be understood by non-technical stakeholders. The examples I used included practice guidance around XLAs, jobs to be done theory, and the customer expectation management method. But as I mentioned, the practices used can vary widely from one organization to another. But the basic steps don't change. The first phase is about taking the wish and decomposing it into a functional specification. Now, this could be very simple, like changing the hours of a parking garage, or extremely complex, like a migration to cloud services. But in each case, some form of functional specification is needed. Technical specifications take the functional specs and describe the details about how the service will be designed, built, and deployed to meet the requirements. It can include information about architecture, database design, algorithms, data structures, APIs, and all kinds of standards. These documents are created from a technical stakeholder perspective, and they focus on how the service will be built and what specific goods and actions will be needed. All kinds of practice guidance can be applied here as well. and it's highly dependent on the nature of the service. So IT services might be interested in ITIL and maybe IT for IT and ISO 20000, and a parking garage might be interested in IPMI and GPC, and healthcare services might focus on HIPAA and so on. In summary, a functional specification focuses on what the system should achieve from a user or business perspective, while a technical specification dives into the technical details of how the system will be built to meet those functional requirements. So now we know what we want to do and how we're going to do it. Now we need to create a service agreement. Service agreements need to add who will do what and how, both in terms of the ongoing operation of the service as well as how it will be supported. As we iterate the service, answering who can lead to outsourcing, which will create different types of service agreements. And each of these will have to work in harmony to deliver successful customer outcomes and great customer experiences with a minimum of cost and effort from the service provider. But regardless of the type of agreement, all of these are basically agreements between a customer and a provider about what the service will do and how it will be supported. For example, the familiar service level agreement, or SLA, defines the expected level of service between the provider and a customer. Its scope would include things like what services are provided, expected outcomes, metrics, roles and responsibilities, and what happens when things go wrong. Internal agreements, or OLAs, might focus more on internal procedures needed to meet SLA requirements, internal roles and responsibilities, and so on. Underpinning contracts would be agreements between the provider and suppliers or vendors, again, clearly outlining roles and responsibilities, quality standards, maybe third-party involvement, and supplier-related information. And master agreements might provide a framework for the overall relationship between the provider and the customer, with general terms and conditions, payment terms, maybe references to other agreements like SLAs, OLAs, and underpinning contracts. Now, one common thread all of these have in common is specifying roles and responsibilities. Who does what and how? In almost all cases, the provider will have at least some existing artifacts, like a service catalog, maybe a service tree or service blueprints, functional and technical specifications, and of course, existing service agreements. But these artifacts often fail to fully decompose services, especially in terms of separating the core functionality of services from the support mechanisms. As an enterprise seeks to take advantage of various practice guidance, it can fragment service agreements, and this can have any number of impacts. First of all, conflicts can arise around who's responsible for what, which leads to complex service agreements. And the more we seek to be specific about who's doing what, we focus more and more on procedures, further increasing complexity. And as we introduce different types of agreements, these problems compound, since all agreements need to be harmonized. And processes get more complex, which complicates automation, leading to higher cost and risk. Here's a simple healthcare example. Let's say a healthcare provider has created a new EHR service to improve patient care and streamline administrative processes. If the service agreement has ambiguity and responsibilities between clinical staff and support team resources, a number of potential challenges can emerge. The clinical staff may assume the support team will provide training, and the support team assumes otherwise. Or there may be uncertainty about who to contact in different clinical contexts. There could be confusion around how to handle customization and updates. And there might be uncertainty around data security. So let's get into how to bridge this abstraction to decomposition gap using the Unified Service Management method. USM uses the term facility to describe what the service does. It's the combination of goods and actions that the service provider makes available to customers in the course of service delivery. So, what's the nature of the service? What goods and actions will the service provide? The nature of a facility can be anything: IT, telephony, legal, parking garage, anything. And support is simply the assistance the customer gets from the provider when they use the facility. The functionality of a facility specifies what the facility can do or what a user can do with it. If you're familiar with ITIL, think of utility or fit for purpose when specifying functionality. The functionality of a facility can vary significantly based on the nature of the discipline involved. For example, IT services will be different than parking garages and healthcare services. The goods or actions deployed, and or the agreements between the customer and the provider. And we can also specify support in the same way. Functionality from a support perspective specifies what kind of support the user gets. Can they contact a service desk? What supporting actions are included? Just failures, or can I request changes? Can I make adjustments to the agreement? What about other requests? USM's non-redundant process model and standard workflows are key to specifying the functionality of support in a logically repeatable way across complex, diverse service supply chains. USM uses the term functioning to specify how well the facility and the support perform their intended purpose. And this is similar to ITIL's warranty or fit for use. So the functioning of a facility specifies how well the facility performs its functionality. And so the functioning of support specifies how well the support is delivered. This is how the Unified Service Management method specifies all services for all agreement types. A service is always a supported facility and specified in the same way. So, whether you're an IT service provider, a parking garage, or offer healthcare services, your overall customer experience depends on the entire journey. The Unified Service Management method enables you to unify your service agreements and still allow the use of any practice framework, reference model, or standard. A common question clients ask is how to take an existing service agreement and map it to the USM method. The USM Service Agreement Workshop was developed by USM professionals at the nonprofit Service Foundation, and it's made available to all USM professionals who can deliver it through accredited USM deployment partners. The workshop can be tailored for delivery in pre- and post-sale formats and can include reformatting a customer's existing agreement if desired. Participants should include people who are involved in setting up service agreements. So service managers, relationship managers, supplier or finance management, and other stakeholders who are directly involved in creating service agreements. Now, as a coaching product, the objective is to enable the client to do this on their own so they can recognize and interpret existing services using USM definitions and unify their service agreements using the USM method. A byproduct of the workshop is also a list of potential improvement actions that can be addressed in USM improvement sprints. The workshop basically flows like this. First, the existing service agreement and potentially other artifacts like the service catalog or service tree, if available, are reviewed. The USM coach uses this information to prepare the workshop. The USM coach then leads the group by color marking the existing service agreement based on the USM specifications. The next step is to relocate the content from the existing service agreement to the USM structure. Then we can look for opportunities to remove duplicate information and optimize the agreement by adding any missing information. These steps typically take about a half a day of the customer's time, plus the time needed mostly by the USM coach to prepare for the workshop, and it can be done on-site or virtually online. For services to deliver on their value proposition, the service provider has to decompose abstract visions as perceived by the customer into an operational reality. Existing and emerging practice guidance will be increasingly needed by the enterprise and will involve cycles of abstraction and decomposition, iterating functional and technical specifications to a logically repeatable definition of a service as a supported facility. This will result in unified service agreements across complex supply chains. Unifying service agreements across the enterprise can be transformative, and it can result in virtuous cycles of improvement, resulting in a more streamlined and effective service management strategy. Improvement sprints are focused on limited sets of improvements that are feasible in an agreed period of time, typically 90 days. This allows any enterprise to deploy the USM method at a pace that meets their organizational, technical, and operational capabilities. The nonprofit Service Foundation has resources that can help. First, you can go to the USM portal or the USM wiki and get much more information about the USM method. You can also contact a USM professional. A registry is provided on the USM portal. I also have some resources on my website and can provide other workshops and certification training as needed. I hope you'll take a closer look at the USM method and contact me if you need more information or have any questions. If you're outside the U.S., I suggest you look at the USM Professional Registry for a USM professional near you.